Welcome to the Mental Flow Show. This is your space to nurture mental health, wellness, and discover your inner glow. So grab a cozy spot, take a breath, and let's dive into the journey of glowing from within.
Have you ever felt like you're just completely stuck? Even when you really want to get things done, Maybe you've wondered, or maybe even been told that you're just being lazy.
Yeah.
Well, today, we're going to dive into a topic that might shed some light on that experience, ADHD paralysis.
Oh, that's a great topic.
Yeah.
And you've hit on something really important right away, that misunderstanding around motivation.
Yeah.
People with ADHD are often mislabeled as lazy or unmotivated, but the reality is far more complex.
Yeah, and that's what our deep dive is all about today. We're going to unpack what ADHD paralysis actually is, how it differs from procrastination, and explore some ways to manage it. Because honestly, understanding this can be a game changer in relationships and even in how you see yourself.
Absolutely. To start, it's crucial to understand that ADHD affects executive functioning in the brain. Things like planning, time management, focus, and even regulating your emotions.
So not just the getting stuff done part of our brains, but also how we handle all the feelings and decisions that come with it.
Precisely. Now, imagine these executive functions like an air traffic controller, right?
Oh, okay.
Everything's running smoothly, planes are landing, taking off, and then suddenly there's a storm.
Oh.
Things get chaotic and the controller struggles to keep up.
Yeah.
That's kind of what happens with ADHD paralysis. When stress and overwhelm hit, the brain can basically short circuit and you're left feeling stuck.
Wow. Okay, that analogy really paints a vivid picture.
It does.
But how is that different from just procrastinating? I mean, we've all been there, putting off that one task we dread.
That's a key distinction. Procrastination is a conscious choice to delay something. You know you need to do it, but you choose to do something else instead. ADHD paralysis, on the other hand, is the inability to act even when you want to.
Right.
The desire is there, but the brain just won't cooperate.
That sounds incredibly frustrating. One of the sources we have here from Charlie Health uses the word hijacked to describe it, like your own brain is holding you hostage.
Exactly. It's this inner battle where you're fully aware of what needs to be done, but you feel powerless to actually do it. And that can be incredibly confusing for both the person experiencing it and those around them.
So let's break this down further.
Yeah.
It seems like ADHD paralysis isn't just one thing, right?
Right.
We came across sources talking about different types of paralysis.
You're spot on. The sources highlight three main types: mental, task, and choice paralysis. Each one impacts a different area of functioning, but they all stem from that underlying challenge with executive function. Let's start with mental paralysis. And this is all about that feeling of being mentally stuck. It can be hard to focus. Thoughts get jumbled. Decisions feel impossible, even in situations that wouldn't normally be overwhelming.
So it's like the mental equivalent of hitting a brick wall. I
Yeah.
imagine this could be especially tough in fast-paced environments where you need to think on your feet.
Precisely. Imagine you're in a meeting and someone asks you a question. For someone experiencing mental paralysis, it's not that they don't know the answer or aren't interested in participating. It's that their brain just can't process the information and formulate a response in that moment. It's like the words are right there, but you can't access them.
That's got to be so frustrating. Almost like having stage fright, but for everyday conversations. What about task paralysis? That one seems pretty self-explanatory, but I'm sure there's more to it.
You're right. The name is pretty straightforward. It's that feeling of being unable to start or finish tasks, even things you want to do. And it's not about lacking willpower or being lazy. It's more like your brain's get up and go switch is just stuck.
Okay, so it's not that you're choosing to binge watch TV instead of doing laundry.
Right.
It's that your brain might be physically incapable of starting that laundry in that moment.
Exactly. You might be staring at that laundry basket knowing you need to get it done.
Yeah.
But the actual act of getting up and starting feels insurmountable. It's like there's an invisible barrier between you and the task.
And then there's choice paralysis.
Yeah.
I've definitely experienced this one, ADHD or not.
Yeah.
Just too many options and you end up feeling frozen.
Choice paralysis, or analysis paralysis, as it's sometimes called, is that feeling of being overwhelmed when faced with decisions. Even simple ones, like what to eat for lunch, can feel monumental. It's not about being indecisive, it's about the brain getting bogged down by all the possibilities.
So instead of smoothly picking an option, you're stuck analyzing every single pro and con, and ultimately end up making no choice at all. I can see how that would be exhausting.
It absolutely can be, and it can lead to a lot of self-criticism. People might think, why can't I just make a simple decision? But it's not that simple when ADHD is in the mix.
Okay, so we've got these different types of paralysis. But what causes these episodes in the first place? What's going on in the brain that leads to this feeling of being stuck?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, it all boils down to those executive function challenges.
Right.
But there are also specific triggers that can make these paralysis episodes more likely.
Let's dig into those triggers. I'm guessing emotional dysregulation plays a big role here. After all, we've been talking about how ADHD affects not just our task management, but also our emotions.
You're absolutely right. People with ADHD often experience emotions very intensely.
Yeah.
And those intense feelings can lead to overwhelm.
Mhm.
And when that happens, it's not uncommon for the brain to basically hit the pause button to protect itself.
So it's like a built-in safety mechanism, the brain's way of saying, okay, things are getting too intense, we need to shut down for a bit.
That's a helpful way to think about it. And the thing is, these emotionally charged situations happen all the time. Work deadlines, disagreements with loved ones, even just navigating a busy social gathering. These can be particularly challenging for folks with ADHD.
And I imagine that sensory overload from our environment could be a trigger too, right?
Absolutely. Think about a crowded, noisy room with bright lights and lots of activity. For someone with ADHD, that sensory input can be incredibly overwhelming. It's like the brain's trying to process everything at once and just can't keep up.
Even for people without ADHD, that kind of environment can be draining. It makes sense that it could be a trigger for paralysis. Are there any other common triggers we should know about?
Two more that frequently come up are perfectionism and a lack of accommodations.
Perfectionism. I wouldn't necessarily link that to ADHD.
It might seem counterintuitive, but perfectionism is actually very common among people with ADHD. And it can be a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it can be a source of motivation, pushing you to excel. But on the other hand, it can create immense pressure and a fear of failure, which can be paralyzing.
So it's like the bar is set so high that it becomes impossible to even start because you're terrified of not meeting your own expectations.
Exactly. And even small mistakes can feel catastrophic, leading to avoidance and procrastination.
And what about the lack of accommodations trigger? What does that look like in practical terms?
It means that many environments, workplaces, schools, even our own homes, aren't designed with neurodiversity in mind. This can make it much harder for someone with ADHD to function effectively.
So think about a traditional office setup. Open plan, constant distractions, the expectation of multitasking.
Right.
That's tough for anyone, but especially for someone with ADHD. It's like trying to run a marathon in flip-flops.
Precisely. It's not about being incapable. It's about the environment creating unnecessary barriers.
Yeah.
And when you're constantly fighting against those barriers, it's easy to feel overwhelmed and paralyzed.
This is all really eye-opening. So if we're trying to support someone with ADHD, it sounds like being mindful of their environment and potential triggers is key.
Absolutely. Even small adjustments can make a big difference. For example, providing a quiet workspace, breaking down tasks into smaller steps, or even just being understanding and patient can go a long way.
That's good to know. But before we dive into strategies for managing ADHD paralysis, I want to touch on something really important. The impact all of this can have on mental health.
Yeah.
It can't be easy to constantly feel like you're falling short.
You're right, it can take a toll. The constant struggle with paralysis can contribute to feelings of anxiety, low self-esteem, even depression. It's a cycle that can be really tough to break.
I imagine it can also lead to a lot of negative self-talk,
Yes.
like blame yourself for being lazy or undisciplined.
Absolutely, and that's why it's so important to cultivate self-compassion and remember that ADHD is a real neurological condition, not a personal failing.
So for anyone listening who's dealing with this, please know that you're not alone, and there's absolutely no shame in seeking support.
Couldn't agree more. Therapy can be incredibly helpful in developing coping strategies and learning to manage the emotional side of ADHD. And remember, there are lots of resources available.
Okay, I think we've laid a solid foundation here, understanding what ADHD paralysis is and what can contribute to it. Now let's get to the part I know many of us are eager to hear about. What can we actually do about it? What are some practical strategies for managing these paralysis episodes?
The good news is that there are plenty of things you can try, and we're going to dive into those right after this.
All right, I'm ready for those actionable tips. Where do we start?
One of the most effective strategies is breaking down tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Okay.
Instead of looking at the whole overwhelming project, focus on just the next tiny step.
Okay, so instead of clean the entire house, it becomes put away 3 things from the counter. That feels a lot less daunting.
Exactly. By breaking it down, you trick your brain into getting started.
Yeah.
Plus, each little win gives you a boost of dopamine, which can help motivate you to keep going.
I love that. It's like building momentum one step at a time. What else can people try?
Another essential strategy is incorporating mindfulness and short breaks throughout the day.
Okay.
Even just a few minutes of deep breathing or stepping away from your workspace can help regulate those intense emotions and prevent overwhelm from building up.
This is where techniques like meditation or even just listening to calming music come in handy, right? It's about giving your brain a chance to reset.
Exactly. And mindfulness isn't just about formal practices. It can be as simple as paying attention to your senses. What do
Whoa.
you see, hear, feel, smell right now?
Yeah.
This helps ground you in the present moment and can be incredibly helpful in managing those racing thoughts and overwhelming feelings.
I think a lot of people might resist taking breaks, feeling like it's unproductive, but it sounds like those breaks are actually crucial for someone with ADHD to function at their best.
You're absolutely right. It's about working with your brain, not against it.
Right.
And that means recognizing when you need to step back and recharge.
Okay, so we've got breaking down tasks, taking mindful breaks. What else should we add to our ADHD paralysis toolkit?
Creating a supportive environment is key. This means minimizing distractions, organizing your workspace, and communicating your needs to those around you.
So for someone working from home, this might mean setting boundaries with family members during work hours, or using noise-canceling headphones to block out distractions.
Exactly. It's about creating an environment that works for you, not against you. And remember, accommodations aren't just for the workplace or school. They can be helpful in any area of your life.
That's a great point. If you know grocery shopping triggers choice paralysis, maybe you order online or make a very specific list to avoid getting overwhelmed by options.
Exactly. It's about identifying your personal triggers and finding ways to minimize their impact.
What about using external tools and reminders? Those seem like they could be really helpful for folks with ADHD who struggle with those executive function challenges.
Absolutely. Things like to-do lists, calendars, alarms, visual timers, even just sticky notes can be game changers.
Hmm.
They help externalize those swirling thoughts and provide a sense of structure.
I'm a big fan of to-do lists myself. There's
Yeah.
something so satisfying about checking things off.
It's not just about the satisfaction, it's about offloading some of that mental effort.
Right.
When you write things down, you free up your brain to focus on the task at hand.
That makes sense.
Mm.
And nowadays, there are so many apps and tools available. It's about finding what works for you.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to experiment. What works for one person might not work for another.
Right.
It's all about finding your own system.
Okay, so we've got breaking down tasks, mindfulness, creating a supportive environment, and using external tools. What else can we do to combat ADHD paralysis?
One more strategy that can be really powerful is scheduling specific times for productivity and building in rewards for completing tasks, even small ones.
So instead of just hoping you'll feel motivated, you're proactively creating a structure for your day, almost like setting appointments for your to-do list.
Precisely. And by adding in rewards, you're tapping into the power of positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
Even something small like a piece of chocolate or a few minutes of listening to your favorite song can be a great motivator.
It's like acknowledging and celebrating those small wins, which can be really powerful for someone with ADHD who's often battling negative self-talk.
Absolutely. It's about shifting the focus from what you haven't done to what you have accomplished.
These are all fantastic strategies. I'm sure they'll be helpful for our listeners. But before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, seeking professional help. These strategies are great, but sometimes you need more support.
You're absolutely right. While these strategies can make a big difference, it's important to remember that ADHD is a complex condition. And sometimes you need the guidance of a professional to develop a personalized treatment plan.
Therapy can also provide a safe space to explore the emotional impact of ADHD paralysis and develop coping mechanisms that are tailored to your specific needs.
Exactly. It's about having someone who understands the unique challenges you're facing and can help you navigate them. It's great that there are more and more options becoming available for people seeking support.
So if you're feeling overwhelmed or like you're struggling to manage ADHD paralysis on your own, please don't hesitate to reach out for help. There are people who care and want to support you.
And remember, ADHD is not a character flaw. It's a different way of thinking and experiencing the world. And with the right support and strategies, you can absolutely thrive.
I love that. Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. Any final thoughts before we wrap up this deep dive?
Just to reiterate that ADHD paralysis is incredibly common. If you're experiencing it, you're not alone. And it's not a sign that you're lazy, unmotivated, or incapable. It's a real challenge, but it's one you can overcome.
I think it's a perfect note to end on.
Hmm.
And now, I have a question for our listeners to ponder as we sign off. Now that you have a deeper understanding of ADHD paralysis, what's one small step you can take today to create a more supportive environment for yourself or someone you care about?
That's a great question to leave everyone with. Remember, even small changes can make a world of difference.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into ADHD paralysis. We hope you learned something new and feel empowered to make positive changes in your life.
And remember, you've got this.
We'll be back next time with another fascinating topic. Until then, take care of yourselves and each other.